Okay, well, I wanted to do my next video on Essay 1 in my little office. I don't have any walls in there except for the outside one, and both furnaces just kind of kicked on, so rather than waiting, I just decided to come into my little studio here. This is my music studio. You won't find me in here very much, as far as on the videos anyway, but wanted to make sure I get this out to you. Wanted to talk about Essay 1, and while I'm in here, since I'm in here, I might as well talk a little bit about music and poetry as well. Essay 1 will be 3 to 4 pages long, double spaced, Times New Roman, cover page. I would like to see you at least use 1 or 2 references, outside sources, for your essay. And you're going to be picking an author, poet, author, musician, songwriter. And I'll say why I said musician slash songwriter in a little bit here. But you really want to pick somebody who hopefully has inspired you, somebody that you really like. And you really want to pick somebody that you have an interest. I mean, you really genuinely have an interest in. My favorite musician in the world is John Fogerty from Creedence Clearwater Revival. And it's funny. I remember listening to Nickelback for the first time and thinking, sounds a little like Creedence. And that's the nature of music, and poetry too, and fiction. If you look at your favorite author, let's say Stephen King, Lady Gaga, or excuse me, musicians, Lady Gaga, Nickelback. You look at famous poets today, so you'll find them often alluding back to their inspiration. Stephen King was clearly inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, H.P. Lovecraft, etc. Lady Gaga is basically a female version of David Bowie. In fact, if you listen to a lot of her songs, you will see a lot of the similar variances in the song. But it's gonna be due in a few weeks. Check your syllabus for that. And this week, I'd like you to pick your topic choice, your author, musician, etc. When you are picking your musician or poet, you want to focus a little bit on their writing style. Okay, how they started writing, what they like to write about, what are their inspirations, who were they trying to be like. Okay, and from there, pick 1 or 2 poems that really show that. Let's say I was going to write an essay on Edgar Allan Poe. I may show how he was inspired by all kinds of things. The Mask of the Black Death that devastated England in the 1300s. He was definitely inspired by really dark tales of horror that were circulating at the time. And I might show some of the inspirations that he had. And for his poetry, I would probably pick, of all things, The Raven, and perhaps another one that you guys wouldn't be as familiar with. And I would show how The Raven really shows Poe's inspirations, his passion for writing, his desire to really focus on dark tales of daily horror, if you will. Obviously he's more geared towards the fiction element, where you could write about the fall of the House of Usher, etc. But that would be a good format for your poetry essay. Let's say you were picking Emily Dickinson's poems. She writes a lot about death, by the way, and I think we'll be looking at a few of her poems soon. But her inspirations were, her youth. She definitely had a troubled upbringing, and she definitely had some issues because she talked a lot about suicide. One of her best poems that I really happen to enjoy is "Because I Could Not Stop the Death, Death kindly stopped for me." You can really look at an author and really see where he or she is going by he or she is trying to emulate. One of the best bands of the 60s, the Beatles, they had their inspiration, in old music of the 50s. And then they just decided to take it one step further. Now I'm going to actually stop right here, and I'm going to do a second section of this. You do not have to watch this next part if you don't want to, excuse me. But I really want to explore, is music poetry? I actually had a teacher who was one of those types where if you disagreed with her, you would just, you might as well, jump off a bridge because you were not going to pass her class. And she said, music is not poetry. And I wanted to mention, if you look up on YouTube the the music video for Nights in White Satin by the Moody Blues, at the end there is a poem. And I wanted so bad to say something to her, but I didn't. So let's ask this question. Is music poetry? Yes. No. Maybe. It almost sounds like we're back in week one with all the confusion, doesn't it? It really depends on the musician. It really depends on the subject. And it really depends on the composition. There is a lot of stuff out there that is really just junk. I could only name you one or two bands that I actually like in today's world. The first one would be Nickelback, obviously. Shinedown. All right, I'll admit I do like Disturbed. And a few other minor bands. But, music really today does not have the punch, the power, and the passion that music from the 60s had. However, there is one band today that still does use poetry as its primary way of communicating, and that is rap music. I'm not the biggest fan of rap music. I recognize its power. I recognize its points. I'm not a big fan of it because oftentimes they're talking a lot about drugs. They're talking a lot about, very negative and derogatory terms to describe women, and I just don't have a taste for that music. I'm not going to say that some of the songs that they do play I don't mind listening to once in a while, but on the whole, I just seem to steer clear of that genre. I listen to jazz, blues, rock, fusion rock, punk rock. I listen to anything else. But artists like Tupac, very talented musician. Some of his songs definitely had a lot of airplay back when he was alive. I know there's some controversy about that. I would consider him a poet. Absolutely. Okay. Eminem, watch it. A lot of his songs do talk a lot about women, etc., and it just seems to be, rehashing. But looking back even further, people like, what's her name, who started playing on piano, Tori Amos. Very lyrical songs, very disturbing songs. If you've ever read the song, listened to the song "Crucify Myself," very, very, very disturbing, imagery that she gives you there. And of course, there's the completely silent "Me and a Gun," which is about rape. Going back to the 80s, the big hair bands, you can find some poems and songs that have some meaning. On the whole, though, it just seems to be a lot of glamour. During the 70s, we had bands like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Creedence Clearwater Revival. The Beatles had broken up, but John Lennon's Working Class Hero was definitely an impact. And back during the 60s, obviously, you had a whole slew of bands that did use poetry as their primary form of expressing themselves. A great one would be by the Rolling Stones, As Tears Go By. Beautiful song. Who else? The Beatles, obviously. Eleanor Rigby. Great song. It really does have a lot of emotion, a lot of power. Along with A Day in the Life. That's another great Beatles song that really has a lot of emotion. Pink Floyd. Money, obviously. There's a lot of songs that they really did well, that really express themselves. And of course, you have one of the greatest films of all time, The Wall. If you're gonna do The Wall, you better do it right, because I do know quite a bit about Pink Floyd, and I know quite a bit about The Wall and how they made that. You can go back all the way back to the 30s. The first drug song that I'm aware of, sure there were ones before that, is a song by B.B. King called Reefer, and that was back in the 30s. Not that I'm into that stuff, but it's interesting looking at how music has progressed through the years. We've gone from, Love, 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 which was the beginning of the 60s to the middle, all the way to many protest songs. Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young did that song Ohio. Well, it's funny, I listened to the song for years, but I wasn't quite sure what it meant. So I looked it up, and it actually had to do with the Kent State shootings in 1970. If you're going to pick a musician, you do have the internet at your disposal. Make sure that you use sources that are credible, because not everything out there is credible. And if you're going to use a musician that's very popular, I'm going to expect a little bit more from you because the information is definitely out there. I've had students write on John Lennon. I've had students write on Paul McCartney. I've had students write on B.B. King, although he was more, a blues session player. I've had students write on Lady Gaga. It wasn't a very well written essay. I've had Tupac Shakur. I've had not Eminem, but the other one, the Notorious B.I.G. I've had a lot of different essays over the years that have actually been very interesting and very informative to me as far as poems go and poetry. So I want you to really expand your horizon. I don't just want you to say, "Well, I'll do Wordsworth because I know Mr. Khan likes Wordsworth." I do like Wordsworth, but he's not my favorite poet. My favorite poet would probably be, oh, I don't know. There's so many out there that I actually do like. But I really want you to pick someone that you're really interested in because I'm finding if you keep incredibly interested in your author choice, the writing comes pretty much on its own. Oftentimes I have had students write on Shakespeare. And they don't even like Shakespeare, but they're writing on him anyways. Now I want to stop here and I want to talk a little bit about plagiarism, which I will also include in my next video. I want to make sure you guys are not plagiarizing. I've actually had students hand in Shakespeare essays and it turned out to be completely 100% fabricated from the essay. So I will actually be double checking and triple checking and quadruple checking to make sure that you are being academically honest in your essay. This is the one thing, I'll be honest with you, growing up, I tried everything to get out of writing an essay. I pushed in my margins, I did size 16 type font, multiple spacing, and I didn't get away with it. And neither will you, I promise you that. But I never plagiarized. Originality is something that I always strive for in my own writing, even in my creative writing. But it's just been, it's interesting how it's out of control on the campus. And we want to make sure that you are being academically honest and that you are doing your own work. You can't progress to a higher level within community college without doing work. So let me end on that note. I know I've been rambling here. I know I've been going on for a long time, but if you have any questions or concerns or comments, please let me know. Thank you.